Let's begin. The moment I saw the folder, my hands began to tremble. Not from fear, from something colder, deadlier. Rage. The man I used to be, the dependable husband, the quiet problem solver, died the second I saw what was inside. A dozen high-resolution photos, time-stamped, each more gutting than the last. And in every one of them was Caroline, my wife of 9 years. We were high school sweethearts, the kind people call meant to be. We'd built a life brick by brick, through student loans, job losses, foreclosures narrowly avoided, late-night ramen dinners, whispered dreams under shared blankets. I wasn't perfect, but I was loyal. I was steady. I thought we were real. But those photos, those sickening, inescapable images, told a different story. Caroline, wearing latex, chained to a stage in a club I'd never seen, crawling on her knees before strangers. Older men, women, couples, wealthy types with smug expressions and cameras in hand. She wasn't just dancing. She was performing in what looked like an exclusive fetish lounge. A secret world. A double life. I recognized her posture, her body language, her smile. But this smile wasn't mine. It belonged to someone else, someone I didn't know. The final photo showed her laughing while being handed a stack of cash. That laugh, that cruel, confident tilt of her head. She was happy, proud, and she had kept it from me. I remember collapsing into the office chair, the edges of my vision going black. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal didn't just cut, it shattered. The trust, the years, the loyalty. Everything crumbled in one horrifying second. The envelope had been waiting in my desk drawer when I returned from a case at the law firm. No name, no note, just the letter D, like it was planted, like someone wanted me to see it. Part of me prayed it was a mistake, a setup, a Photoshop nightmare. But I knew better. I called a private investigator that night, an old contact from a licensing dispute I once handled. I needed proof, hard evidence, not for confrontation, not yet. I wanted her to choke on her own lies. But I still didn't expect what came next. 2 days later, the PI handed me a second folder, even thicker. Caroline wasn't just involved in the club. She was a key player, a favorite among elite clients. She wasn't forced into anything. She had joined willingly. She had been recruiting others. Recruiting. That word haunted me. She'd lied about auditions, side gigs, acting roles. She'd worn lingerie that cost more than our car payments, claiming it was for self-confidence. But she wasn't buying it for me. She was buying it for them. I watched her for the shadows of that club a week later, my hands clenched behind a black mask, pretending to be a guest. I had bribed my way in, paid cash I didn't have, and melted into the crowd like a ghost. And there she was, gliding across the stage, kneeling before men twice her age, letting them touch her, applauding them, bowing to them. It wasn't shame I saw on her face. It was pleasure. And when she saw me, when I stood up and tore off my mask, yelling her name across the hall, the entire place fell silent. She froze mid-act, her mouth opening, but no sound coming out. Her entire world cracked as she recognized me. "What the hell are you doing here?" she shrieked, covering herself as if modesty still meant something. I held up the folder in front of the entire room. "You tell me." Her expression warped into fury, humiliation, and fear. She screamed for the guards. Screamed that I was stalking her. Screamed that I had no right to follow her. And then she threatened me. She threatened to call the police, to have me arrested in her world, in her club, surrounded by people who cheered her on like some dark goddess. And they did arrest me, drag me out, beaten, bruised, handcuffed with plastic ties, and tossed onto the street like trash. I didn't even fight back, because in that moment, I knew what I needed to do. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to burn everything she built, and I'd do it with the same calm, meticulous precision I'd once used to build our life together. I was done being the dependable husband. I was done being the fool. I was ready to become the man she never saw coming. I didn't open the front door when she came home 2 days later. Instead, I changed the locks. When she finally realized she couldn't walk in like before, she banged on the door, voice shrill and entitled. "Open up, Daniel. You seriously locked me out." I waited a long moment, then opened it just enough for her to see my face, stone cold, unmoved. "You don't live here anymore," I said. Caroline blinked. For a split second, she looked small, confused. Then the mask slid right back into place. "You can't do this," she snapped. "This is my house, too. I've got rights." "Not for long," I replied flatly. "Your rights ended the night you threw me under a stage full of strangers and sold your soul for a pile of crumpled bills." She tried to push her way in. I didn't move an inch. She shoved at the door with one hand, the other planted on her hip. "You're being dramatic. You had no right to come there. That was my place. My job." "No," I said quietly. "It was our lie. And now it's over." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you're smart, huh? You think you got something on me? You broke into a private club. You assaulted me in public. I can press charges." "Do it," I said, stepping forward. "Please. Because I've got photos, videos, testimonies, bank transfers. And now I've got a reason to make all of it public. You'll lose everything." She hesitated, and then her voice softened, manipulative, syrupy. "Daniel, you're angry. I understand. But we can work through this. It's just a phase." I was exploring. "You were recruiting other wives," I said. "I met Nancy." Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. "That's right. The girl you brought into your twisted world. She told me everything. The commissions, the lies, the mockery, the way you laughed behind my back. You made me your punchline." I let that sit in the air for a beat. Then I closed the door on her. The next day, I filed for divorce. But I wasn't stupid. I knew Caroline would try to flip the narrative. And I was right. 3 days later, I was served with a civil complaint. She was suing me. Spousal abuse, emotional distress, financial neglect. The real kicker? She claimed I abandoned my child, an 11-year-old girl named Mia. I nearly laughed when I saw the paperwork. I had no child, Caroline, and I never even discussed kids seriously. She always said she wasn't ready. But now she was claiming I had neglected a secret daughter? I stormed into my lawyer's office with the documents. Barbara Vance, a bulldog in a tailored suit, with a reputation for turning lies into ashes, studied the paperwork and raised an eyebrow. "She's playing dirty," she said. "That means she's scared. Can we shut this down?" I asked, barely able to sit still. "Can we prove this is all fabricated?" Barbara leaned back. "Oh, we'll do better than that. We'll bury her case so deep it'll take a rescue crew to find it." We began gathering everything. Surveillance, phone records, the PI's full report, Nancy's screenshots, Caroline's earnings from the club, which she had hidden from our share taxes. And the worst part? Nancy had video evidence of Caroline bragging about using her husband's ignorance to bankroll her club career. She said, "You were just a blind little lawyer who'd never figure it out," Nancy told me when we met again. Said you'd beg her to come back once she claimed victim status. I stared at the floor. "I'm done begging," I muttered. "I'm going to make her regret ever thinking I'd crawl." When the court hearing date arrived, I showed up in a clean navy suit, clutching a folder that held the final nail in the coffin. Caroline walked in wearing white, a calculated move. By her side stood her attorney and a girl who looked like her miniature twin, the supposed daughter. The courtroom went silent. For a moment, I saw the flicker of smugness in Caroline's eyes, like she thought she'd already won. But that wouldn't last. Not once Barbara began to speak. We presented the evidence with precision. We countered every accusation. We played a short audio clip in which Caroline said, "The idiot husband still has no clue. I could sell the house from under him, and he'd just smile and say okay." By the end of Barbara's opening, Caroline's lawyer looked shaken. And then we called Nancy to the stand. When Nancy spoke, Caroline's face dropped. The girl next to her leaned in, whispering, "What is she talking about, Mom?" Caroline didn't answer. She didn't have answers anymore. The hearing was still unfolding, the damage still unwinding. But for the first time, I could see it in Caroline's eyes, the dawning realization. She didn't own the story anymore. I did, and I wasn't done yet. The courtroom had turned into a theater, and Caroline was losing her starring role. Nancy's testimony was a dagger, sharp, damning, undeniable. She spoke with quiet confidence, eyes steady on the judge as she detailed how Caroline had groomed vulnerable women, lied to her husband, and funneled club earnings into personal luxuries, all while playing the victim. She was never forced, Nancy said firmly. She loved it. She told me herself. The secrecy, the money, the power over people who trusted her, it thrilled her. Caroline was shaking now. Whether from rage or fear, I couldn't tell. But the mask was crumbling. Barbara turned to the judge. We submit authenticated bank statements showing Caroline received over $27,000 in unreported income from these club performances. She claimed poverty while hiding these funds. We also have text messages that show she intended to paint my client as abusive to manipulate public sympathy. She paused, then added with exact precision, "Your Honor, she is not the victim in this marriage. My client is." The judge, a stern woman with iron gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen it all, leaned forward. "What about the child?" "Mia." Barbara didn't blink. "We have requested DNA testing. There is no indication, no medical record, no school documentation, no prior mention of the child during their 9 years of marriage. Not even a photograph in their shared home." Caroline's attorney objected. "This child has been emotionally devastated by Mr. Hale's abandonment. She doesn't even know me." I cut in, my voice steady. "She never met me before today." The judge silenced the room with a single motion of her gavel. "This child's paternity will be determined by medical means, not courtroom drama." I glanced over at the girl. She looked terrified, and for the first time, I realized maybe she was Caroline's daughter. Just not mine. But Caroline had used her as a weapon. A pawn. She would have let her daughter believe I was a monster if it meant getting what she wanted. That's who she was. The judge reviewed the files, the bank slips, the images, and the messages. Each one another blow to Caroline's paper-thin lies. And then Barbara made her final move. "Your Honor," she said, her tone razor-sharp, "my client was physically assaulted and forcibly removed from a venue where his wife publicly degraded him in front of dozens of witnesses. We have medical records documenting his injuries, including bruised ribs and a laceration to the face. We have witness statements, including from former club members, confirming Caroline ordered the bouncers to remove him violently." She let sink in. This was not just betrayal. It was cruelty, calculated in public. The judge's expression didn't change, but I could feel it. The weight of the truth had landed. Then came the verdict. No alimony, no child support, no claims of abuse upheld. The judge allowed the divorce, immediate and final. Caroline would walk away with what she brought into the marriage. Nothing. No house. No savings. No car. And certainly not my name. Her face when she realized it, when she finally understood she had lost everything, was a mix of disbelief and fury. As the gavel slammed, she turned to me. "You think this is over?" she hissed. I leaned in and whispered so only she could hear, "No, Caroline, this was the beginning." Because while the courtroom drama had ended, I wasn't done. Not until every trace of her twisted empire was reduced to dust. After the court ruled in my favor, the first thing I did was exhale. The second thing, I turned every remaining ounce of pain into purpose. Caroline hadn't just cheated. She'd created an ecosystem of exploitation, recruiting wives, manipulating women for cash, lying with practiced ease. And now, she had the audacity to believe she'd rebuild it. Privately, quietly, somewhere else. But I wouldn't let that happen. I wasn't looking for closure anymore. I was looking for destruction. Nancy had already opened the door. After the hearing, she messaged me privately with one final gift, a burner phone. She kept all her club contacts on this, she explained. She never expected to lose it. On it were names, numbers, photos, and even audio recordings of her coaching women on how to lie to their husbands. I listened to one late at night, heart pounding. Say it's a modeling gig, a spa thing. Use words that sound legit. These guys just need an excuse not to ask more questions. And then once the money starts coming in, they won't care. That was Caroline. Calculating. Charismatic. Cold. I compiled everything and passed it to Barbara. She was giddy in the way only lawyers can be when serve a perfect case on a silver platter. Then I took one more step. I reached out to the IRS. Because while betrayal burns, financial fraud destroys. She hadn't reported any of her income from the club, and the numbers were significant. When Barbara cross-checked her bank accounts, she found at least 5 large deposits, each carefully disguised through different aliases and apps. Enough to get audited. Enough to get prosecuted. 3 weeks later, Caroline got a visit from federal agents. I wasn't there, but Nancy told me what happened. She tried to flirt her way out of it, she said. Didn't work. Her accounts were frozen. Her passport revoked. She couldn't even touch the funds she stashed in crypto. The empire she built with secrecy and seduction, it crumbled in her hands. And that would have been enough. It should have been enough. But then came the documentary. Apparently, a local journalist had attended the hearing. Word spread, and soon a team from an investigative YouTube channel reached out to Barbara, asking for an anonymous interview. They wanted to do a deep dive on the underground exploitation of married women in exclusive clubs. They didn't name her. They didn't need to. They painted the story through the lens of a former lawyer who exposed a secret underground ring after discovering his wife was involved. The video went viral. 3.2 million views in the first week. Comments poured in. She used him like a bank account. This is what happens when you lie and manipulate. I hope he found peace. Caroline, of course, went off the grid. Deleted every social media account. Her mother tried calling me once, demanding I stop humiliating the family. I told her the truth. I'm not doing anything. Her choices humiliated themselves. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life. I moved to a smaller city, took a job at a nonprofit that helped victims of marital fraud and manipulation. It didn't pay much, but for the first time in years, I felt clean. Like I wasn't living someone else's lie. And oddly enough, the peace felt louder than the revenge. But sometimes, when the nights get quiet and I see a couple laughing in a cafe, I think about the man I used to be. The one who folded her laundry, who worked late to cover the mortgage, who thought love meant sacrifice. He died the day Caroline decided the spotlight was worth more than loyalty. And I don't mourn him. I remember him. So I never become him again. 6 months had passed since the last court date. It felt like a decade had gone by, and I carried every second of it in my bones. Caroline never returned to the city. Her mother eventually sold her condo. Rumor had it she tried to start over in another state, but the digital trail followed her. The IRS didn't drop the charges, and as far as I knew, the club had been investigated and quietly dismantled. She lost her reputation, her clients, her credibility, and I never had to raise my voice again. That was the final blow. Not screaming, not fighting, silence. I had moved into a small house on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The air smelled like pine, and the mornings came with birdsong instead of the hiss of Caroline's criticism. I painted the walls with my own hands, learned to cook properly, read the books I put off for years. And somewhere in that quiet space, I met Lena. She was nothing like Caroline. She worked at a shelter for women recovering from domestic trauma. She had calm eyes, honest eyes, the kind of presence that didn't demand the room's attention, but somehow held it anyway. We started talking at a local library, of all places. It began with small things, book recommendations, casual banter, and evolved into real conversations. About life, pain, healing. I didn't tell her everything at first, but one evening I did. I laid it all out. The betrayal, the club, the humiliation, the trial, the revenge. I thought she'd pull back. Instead, she nodded quietly and said, "That sounds like hell, but it sounds like you found your way out of it. That's the part that matters." Her words didn't fix everything, but they stitched something back together. Not a return of the man I was, but the man I was meant to become. And still, the past never fully disappeared. A year later, I got a letter in the mail. It had no return address, just my name. Inside was a folded sheet of paper in Caroline's handwriting. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to say I never thought you'd actually leave me. I always thought you'd stay. That was my mistake. You were the best part of my life. I destroyed it. I know that now." There was no apology, just admission. I never replied, because some chapters don't get closure. They just end. Now, I don't spend my time thinking about revenge, or justice, or the scars she left. I spend it walking barefoot in the garden, laughing with Lena, helping people who still believe they're trapped. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's rebuilding your life so beautifully that the person who broke you can't recognize it anymore. It's peace. It's power. It's freedom. And it's mine now. Forever.